We're going to continue with Chapter 4, page 52. As Johnny told him the story, I studied daily, trying to figure out what there was about this tough-looking hood that a girl like Cherry Valance could love. Tow-headed and shifty-eyed, Daly was anything but handsome. Yet in his hard face there was character, pride, and a savage defiance of the world. He could never love Cherry Valance back. It would be a miracle if Daly loved anything. The fight for self-preservation had hardened him beyond caring. He didn't bat an eye when Johnny told him what had happened, only grinned and said, "Good for you," when Johnny told him how he knifed the Soch. Finally, Johnny finished. "We figured you could get us out if anyone could. I'm sorry we got you away from the party." "Oh, shoot, kid." Daly glanced contemptuously over his shoulder. "I was in the bedroom." He suddenly stared at me. "Glory, but your ears can get red, pony boy." I was remembering what usually went on in the bedroom at Buck's parties. Then Daly grinned in amused realization. "It wasn't anything like that, kid. I was asleep, or trying to be." With all this racket, Hank Williams, he rolled his eyes and added a few adjectives about Hank Williams. "Me and Shepard had a run-in, and I cracked some ribs. I just needed a place to lay over." He rubbed his side ruefully. "Old Tim can pack a punch. He won't be able to see out of one eye for a week." He looked us over and sighed. "Well, wait a second, and I'll see what I can do about this mess." Then he took a good look at me. "Pooh boy, are you wet?" "Yes," I stammered through chattering teeth. "Glory hallelujah." He opened the screen door and pulled me in, motioning for Johnny to follow. "You'll die of pneumonia before the cops ever get you." He half dragged me into an empty bedroom, swearing at me all the way. "Get that sweatshirt off." He threw a towel at me. "Dry off and wait here." At least Johnny's got his jean jacket. "You ought to know better than to run away in just a sweatshirt, and a wet one at that. Don't you ever use your head?" He sounded so much like Darry that I stared at him. He didn't notice and left us sitting on the bed. Johnny lay back on it. "Wish I had me a weed." My knees were shaking as I finished drying off, sitting there in my jeans. Daly appeared after a minute. He carefully shut the door. "Here." He handed us a gun and a roll of bills. "The gun's loaded." "For Pete's sake, Johnny, don't point that thing at me." "Here's $50. That's all I could get out of Merrill tonight. He's blown his loot from that last race." You might have thought it was Daly who fixed those races for Buck, being a jockey and all, but it wasn't. The last guy to suggest it lost straight teeth. It's the truth. Daly rode the ponies honestly and did his best to win. It was the only thing Daly did honestly. "Pony, did Darry and Soda Pop know about this?" I shook my head. Daly sighed. "Boy, howdy. I ain't itching to be the one to tell Darry and get my head busted." "Then don't tell him," I said. I hated to worry Soda Pop and would have liked to let him know I had gotten this far okay, but I didn't care if Darry worried himself gray-headed. I was too tired to tell myself I was being mean and unresponsible. I convinced myself it would be fair to make Daly tell him. Darry would beat him to death for giving us the money and gun and getting us out of town. "Here." Daly handed me a shirt about 60 million sizes too big. "It's Buck's. You and him ain't exactly the same size, but it's dry." He handed me his worn brown leather jacket with the yellow sheep wool lining. "It'll get cold where you're going, but you can't risk being loaded down with blankets." I started buttoning up the shirt. It about swallowed me. "Hop the 3:15 freight and win Dixieville," Daly instructed. "There's an old abandoned church on top of J Mountain. There's a pump in back, so don't worry about water. Buy a week's supply of food as soon as you get there this morning before the story gets out. And then don't do as much as stick your noses out the door. I'll be up there as soon as I think it's clear. Man, I thought New York was the only place I could get mixed up in a murder rap." At the word murder, Johnny made a small noise in his throat and shuddered. Daly walked us back to the door, turning off the porch light before we stepped out. "Get going." He messed up Johnny's hair. "Take care, kid," he said softly. "Sure, Daly, thanks," and we ran into the darkness. We crouched in the weeds beside the railroad tracks, listening to the whistle grow louder. The train slowed to a screaming halt. "Now," whispered Johnny. We ran and pulled ourselves into an open boxcar. We pressed against the side, trying to hold our breath, while we listened to the railroad workers walk up and down outside. One poked his head inside, and we froze, but he didn't see us, and the boxcar rattled as the train started up. "The first stop will be Winn-Dixieville," Johnny said, laying the gun down gingerly. He shook his head. I don't see why he gave me this. I couldn't shoot anybody. Then for the first time, really, I realized that what we were in for. Johnny had killed someone. Quiet, soft-spoken little Johnny, who wouldn't hurt a living thing on purpose, had taken a human life. We were really running away, and the police after us for murder and a loaded gun by our side. I wish we'd asked Daly for a pack of cigarettes. I stretched out and used Johnny's legs for a pillow. Curling up, I was thankful for Daly's jacket. It was too big, but it was warm. Not even the rattling of the train could keep me awake, and I went to sleep in a hoodlum's jacket with a gun lying next to my hand. I was hardly awake when Johnny and I leaped off the train into the meadow. Not until I landed in the dew and got a wet shock did I realize what I was doing. Johnny must have woken me up and told me to jump, but I didn't remember it. We lay in the tall weeds and damp grass, breathing heavily. The dawn was coming. It was lightening the sky to the east, and a ray of gold touched the hills. The clouds were pink, and meadow larks were singing. This is the country, I thought, half asleep. My dreams come true, and I'm in the country. Blast it, pony boy. Johnny was rubbing his legs. You must have put my legs to sleep. I can't even stand up. I barely got off that train. I'm sorry. Why didn't you wake me up? That's okay. I didn't want to wake you up until I had to. Now, how did we find J Mountain? I asked Johnny. I was still groggy with sleep and wanted to sleep forever, right there in the dew and dawn. Go ask someone. The story won't be in the paper yet. Make like a farm boy taking a walk or something. I don't look like a farm boy, I said. I suddenly thought of my long hair combed back and the slouching stride I used from habit. I looked at Johnny. He didn't look like any farm boy to me. He still reminded me of a lost puppy who had been kicked too often, but for the first time I saw him as a stranger might see him. He looked hard and tough because of his black t-shirt and his blue jeans and jacket, and because his hair was heavily greased and so long. I saw how his hair curled behind his ears, and I thought, we both need a haircut and some decent clothes. I looked down at my worn, faded blue jeans, my too big shirt, and Daly's worn out jacket. They'll know we're hoods the minute they see us, I thought. I have to stay here, Johnny said, rubbing his legs. You go down the road and ask the first person you see where J Mountain is. He winced at the pain in his legs, then come back, and for Pete's sake, run a comb through your hair and quit slouching down like a thug. So Johnny had noticed it too. I pulled a comb from my back pocket and combed my hair carefully. I guess I look okay now, huh, Johnny? He was studying me. You know, you look an awful lot like Soda Pop, the way you've got your hair and everything. I mean, except your eyes are green. They ain't green, they're gray, I said, reddening, and I look about as much like Soda as you do. I got to my feet. He's good looking. Shoot, Johnny said with a grin. You are too. I climbed over the barbed wire fence without saying anything else. I could hear Johnny laughing at me, but I didn't care. I went strolling down the red dirt road, hoping my natural color would come back before I met anyone. I wonder why Darry and Soda Pop are doing now, I thought, yawning. Soda had the whole bed to himself for once. I bet Darry's sorry he ever hit me. He'll really get worried when he finds out Johnny and I killed that Soch. Then, for a moment, I pictured Soda Pop's face when he heard about it. I wish I was home, I thought absently. I wish I was home and still in bed. Maybe I am. Maybe I'm just dreaming. It was only last night that Daly and I had laid down behind the girls at the night, had sat down behind the girls at the nightly double. Glory, I thought, with a bewildering feeling of being rushed. Things are happening too quick, too fast. I figured I couldn't get into any worse trouble than murder. Johnny and I would be hiding for the rest of our lives. Nobody but Daly would know where we were, and he couldn't tell anyone because he'd go to jail again for giving us that gun. If Johnny gets caught, they'll give him the electric chair, and if they caught me, I'd be sent to a reformatory. I've heard about reformatories from Curly Shepherd, and I didn't want to go to one at all. So we'd have to be hermits for the rest of our lives and never see anyone but Daly. Maybe I'd never see Darry or Soda Pop again, or even Two-Bit or Steve. I was in the country, but I knew I wasn't going to like it much as I thought I would. There are things worse than being a greaser. I met a sunburned farmer driving a tractor down the road. I waved to him and stopped. Could you tell me where J Mountain is? I asked politely as I could. He pointed on down the road. Follow this road to the big hill over there. That's it. Taking a walk? Yes, sir. I managed to look sheepish. We're playing Army, and I'm supposed to report to headquarters there. I can lie so easily that it spooks me sometimes. Soda says it comes from reading so much. But then Two-Bit lies all the time, and he never opens a book. Boys will be boys, the farmer said with a grin, and I felt dully that he sounded as corn pony as Hank Williams. He went on, and I walked back to where Johnny was waiting. We climbed up the road to the church, although it was a lot further away than it looked. The road got steeper with every step. I was feeling kind of drunk. I always do when I get too sleepy, and my legs go heavier and heavier. I guess Johnny was sleepier than I was. He had stayed awake on the train to make sure we got off at the right place. It took us about 45 minutes to get there. We climbed the back window. It was a small church, real old and spooky and spider-webby. It gave me the creeps. I've been in a church before. I used to go all the time, even after Mom and Dad were gone. Then one Sunday, I talked Soda into coming with Johnny and me. He didn't want to come unless Steve did, and Two-Bit decided he might as well come too. Daly was sleeping off a hangover, and Darry was working. When Johnny and I went, we sat in the back, trying to get something out of the sermon and avoiding the people because we weren't dressed as sharp as most of them. Nobody seemed to mind, and Johnny and I really liked to go. But that day, well, Soda can't sit still long enough to enjoy a movie, much less a sermon. It wasn't long before he and Steve and Two-Bit were throwing paper wads at each other and clowning around, and finally Steve dropped the hymn book with a bang, accidentally, of course. Everyone in the place turned around and looked at us, and Johnny and I nearly crawled under the pews, and then Two-Bit waved at them. I hadn't been to church since, but this church gave me a kind of creepy feeling. What do you call it? Premonition? I flopped down on the floor and immediately decided not to do any more flopping. The floor was stone and hard. Johnny stretched out beside me, resting his head on his arm. I started to say something to him, but I went to sleep before I could get the words out of my mouth. But Johnny didn't notice. He was asleep too. All right, boys and girls, make sure that you answer the questions, complete the do now, and try your best, and hit submit.